ladies and gentlemen, to the Fluffenhammer for the first time in quite a while. My sincere apologies for that. Also, my sincere apologies for no cold opening this time. I have no skill in that regard. That is the domain of my co-host Adam, who unfortunately can't be here today. He is busy with matters warp-based. He is somewhere off in the Garden of Nurgle doing very, very unpleasant things with very, very unpleasant creatures, I'm sure, or something to that effect anyway. But I do have a guest with me, a kind of alternative Adam, in a way, Mr. Adam White. Adam, hello.
I'm the Adam that's slightly less like a Viking.
Yes, the slightly less Nordic Adam.
Yeah. Southern softy Adam.
But welcome, Adam. Adam,
Thank you.
actually, Adam, you've been on the Fluffenhammer before, haven't you?
I have, yes.
You have. In the very, very early days, we had you on to talk about. Well, it was so interesting. We've had so many people on. We've had my friend Tom, who's an Anglican vicar.
Yes.
So we've had his perspective on the hobby, which has been absolutely fantastic. We've had some former employees of Games Workshop on to talk about the experience of actually working in the stores and so on and so forth. You come at this hobby from a very, very unusual perspective. Am I right? So what is your association with the Games Workshop hobby?
Well, there's a couple. The first is the fact that I was a poor child.
Mm.
An odd way to start it off. But when you're in a group of kids and you don't have the computer game,
right?
You just watch the others play the computer game.
Oh.
In the 1980s, there was Salvation, and that was the little booklet that you got with the game, because that was where the lore was at.
Uh-huh.
So everybody else would be getting the rings or scoring the points or punching, and I would be going, so Zangief is related to Dalsim in a wholly unexpected way. And people would be like, shut up, Adam. And then that went into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles role-playing game, which is some of the finest 80s role-playing books imaginable. They are wonderful. And then I always kept an eye out on fantasy in general, because I'm into that sort of stuff. And my hook into all of this is I love good audiobooks, and I love a certain Inquisitor called Kane. Because he just ticks all my boxes with the humor.
Right.
So there's all of that. And then about a year and a half ago, there's another element that comes in, which is that in my daytime job, I deal with finance. A lot of people listening to this deal with finance. It doesn't mean we're all fat cat bankers. It just means that we're dependent on certain feeds and we notice certain things. And Games Workshop is so much about finance right now. It's scary.
It's one of those areas of the hobby that's actually become more pervasively known of late, hasn't it? I mean, previously, the sort of rumor sites, the podcasts and so on, they focused almost exclusively on the game side of things or on the lore side of things, but every so often you will get a thread or you will get an article come up which talks about Games Workshop in its in terms of its business model, its finances, what its structure is, and it's becoming increasingly fascinating, I've got to say.
It doesn't dominate it now. It does. I mean, it's put into headlines for those people that want an interesting story, and so you'll see it in a lot more places. You'll see it on the BBC, quite heavily. You'll see it in the Financial Times. You'll see it in an awful lot of publications online, and there's a secondary market as well. So when there is a story, the kind of the lower end of the journalistic scale will just grab it and use it as clickbait.
Right,
but
right.
There's a lot of good in it, but it's also quite misleading.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, obviously, most of us are coming at this from a very layman's perspective, and our only source of information is either what Games Workshop itself releases or what is out there on the general site. So I imagine a very synthesized feed of information, yeah?
Yes and no. That's part of the whole beauty of it, is that because of what's happened. And by the way, these are things that most of the important stuff happened back in 1994.
Right. So very, very early on.
Yes. So, but it's just now people are seeing it in a different way, and it's kind of easy to misread it.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's not as dry as it appears
as
to
it
be.
may sound.
No,
yeah?
because it is amazing. Like, fans know all this stuff.
Yeah.
They literally know all of this stuff. Different terms, yes. Different phrases, yes. But the points that you pick out on the story of Games Workshop and the story of this whole weird share thing that brings us to today is something that it's just it from the flip side.
Absolutely, we know it
it's
from
like cause and effect.
Absolutely, so we know it in terms of the customer experience, yeah.
That's it.
And I imagine Adam and I have discussed it before. I mean, we have talked about the sort of flows and rhythms of the company, the peaks and troughs that it's experienced, which are obviously directly related to its financial situation, and just the way it's operating.
It's crazy, but it's also as well very simple. Before the show, you said, who'd have thought that good customer service would be rewarded with happy customers?
Right.
And you can take that in this stupid, crazy world we live in. You can take that and you can print that on a board and you can put that above the heads of people that run certain businesses, and they still wouldn't get it.
Yeah, right.
And in fact, it's taken a very interesting man to get it.
In terms of Games Workshop, yes.
Yeah.
Because am I right in thinking that during that particular era that a lot of the customer base referred to as the dark times, which is when a lot of people fell away from the company, myself included, from the hobby and started viewing it externally, there was a particular CEO in charge?
Well, let me just ask, what are the dark times? Because again, my knowledge of Games Workshop is limited,
right.
And I'm going to hold my hand up and admit that,
right.
because of how I connect with it. But what period is the dark times?
It's hard to define, but the dark period, certainly from my perspective, was sort of towards the mid 2000s, right up until around 2015, maybe even no 2016 really.
Aha, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Okay, let me rewind a bit then.
Okay.
So imagine a company that starts up in a bedroom.
Yeah, right.
Producing boards for traditional games like backgammon. And 10 years later opens its first US shop. That's a hell of a change.
Yeah.
Now, if anyone listening has ever done a podcast or a YouTube or a small project or a craft or even at work where you've grown as a company or done anything, you know that as things change and expand, then some people will come in and some people will leave. Sometimes you jump on a project because you like it. Sometimes the project gets so big or impersonal or goes a different direction and you move off. And by 84, Games Workshop had, I think, lost its original members. I believe so. Oh, sorry, no, by 94, actually.
Yeah.
They'd lost their original members. Different people were in charge, and it wasn't just this hobby that had grown up and expanded and was ruling the world. It had gotten to a certain point, but it didn't really know where to go from there.
Right.
And people had bought Games Workshop at the time. The people who owned it thought, well, we need a cash injection. We need to take it to the next level. We also need to make a very nice sum of money for ourselves. So that's when they went public. And, I'm not going to go into the heavy jargon, but you take the value of the company, you divide it by an amount of shares that Mr. Banker says you should release, and that is the value of your shares. Your share times the amount is the value of your company. Your company does terribly, then the company is worth less and the shares are worth less as well. It's really that simple. But from sort of 1994 through all the way really to 2015, you had a series of managers that they had this IP, they had these ideas, but they could never really connect.
Right.
There was great lore coming out, there's great ideas coming out, but at the end of the day, the fans were getting disillusioned. They were trying to figure out what was going on. Now you know this.
Absolutely.
All the fans know this. So it takes no leap to go, well, I wonder how much the company was worth then. It wasn't worth that much.
No, I can imagine.
It was just trickling along. Now, if you imagine that shares and the sizes of companies, you imagine that because all of them have to be registered. Mm-hmm. And if you have shares, then they're registered on the stock market, because that's the safe way that you can buy and sell shares. Doesn't matter where you buy them, it all goes through that as a control. But it has kind of like a football division system. So the big ones, the companies that are worth the most, are put in brackets. So the top 100 is the FTSE 100.
Right.
The FTSE 250, AIM, blah, 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 blah. As they get bigger, more people can invest in those shares. And that's something important that we'll come back to later. But it also means as well that they're in the news. Whereas some minnow, like that plumbing company round the corner from you, might have shares, but you've never heard of them. Anyway. So
it's almost like a form of free advertising in a way.
That's it, yes. And there are lots of benefits to shares as well. There's legitimacy. Mm-hmm. The company looks big if it has shares. Mm. There's taxation. It allows as well for them to get in extra investment quite easily. However, there's a big downside. And that is, you can't have the boss hiding all the cash in a box in a corner of the office anymore if you're public. You have to tell everybody your profits and your losses. Do you know you can go online now, you can find the salaries of all the bosses of Games Workshop. Mm-hmm. You can find out if they've bought shares in the last year. You can find out if they've come into the job or left the job. You can find out so much information because they are legally required to do that. And if you tell your bunch of shareholders, hey, we've done sod all for 10 years and we've annoyed our fan base and we've not really grown, they're not going to be happy. And shareholders can vote on who runs the company.
Right.
They have power. And also, there are shareholder meetings, and admittedly, a lot of companies will hold these in the most remote parts of the most remote countries in the world, so that shareholders can't actually ask them questions. But they still do it. They still have to fess up. Yeah. And for those few hours or few days a year, they are complete. It's not like E3 here. They're not being cheered on stage. They've got to answer for their crimes throughout the year.
They've got to justify themselves.
That's it. Now, are you talking in terms of CEO about Tom Kirby?
Yes.
Yes.
Certainly am, yes.
Right. So when Tom Kirby left, did it flash up on your social media like a siren call, or did you barely notice it?
I'll be honest, I didn't notice myself. I didn't notice.
And why would you? Yeah. Why would a lot of people? Because if there's one word you could use for Games Workshop, and it's relationship with the fans, it's apathy.
Oh, at that point, you have to bear in mind, this is a company that didn't even have, beyond the online store, which was terrible at that time, by the way, it had no internet presence.
Yep.
It didn't have a Facebook page. Insanity. Insanity for any kind of company, at that point. It didn't have like a Twitter feed or anything.
And you know as well, it was taking down sites that had been created.
Right.
It was using the IP infringement gimmick.
So actively attacking
fan sites.
Yeah, its fan base.
Exactly. And I mean, like everything as well. When somebody new comes in and changes something, especially something that has been so poor for so long.
Yeah.
If something goes right one day, you don't look at that and go, hey, the company has changed. The company is good. Let's buy everything. You don't do that. You just go, they got lucky.
Yeah.
And because you need a series of good things to happen. You need a series of positive events to go, maybe they've changed. And once things change as well, you then need to believe that the change is going to continue.
Yes.
So Roundtree came into it. He, I believe, was a member of staff through the company.
Yeah.
He he came in 2015. I'm just going to read out some figures here. Okay, there's only a couple of figures. I'm going to talk about profit. Simple profit. Right. Profit in 2015 was 16.48 million.
Okay.
Think about that. That's a company that's not doing well.
Yeah.
It's still pulling in 16 million.
Mm-hmm.
So these are big things we're talking about here.
Yeah.
Cash flow is massive. Next year, when obviously still betting ideas, 16.86.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next 3 years, 38.32.
What?
74.32 and 81.20.
Wow.
That's 2019. That's on revenue of 256 million.
It doubles, like, within the first year.
It doubles within the first year.
This is because of the new business practices, presumably, yeah.
In 17 it doubled. In 18 it doubled again.
Wow.
And then it's increased. And believe me, the fuss over Christmas and the fuss over New Year is all about the last. I think it's the last quarter or the last 6 months where the profits are really chunky.
Okay.
Now, let me go back a bit, because we're going into the finances and people are going to start tuning out and going, well, you're not talking about the story anymore.
Right.
Here's the thing. So imagine you get up late on a Saturday. Mm-hmm. And you're feeling a bit rough and you stumble out of bed and you leave the bedroom a mess and you go into the lounge and you crash out and you're not motivated to really do anything. But around middle of the afternoon, you do something and it's okay. And then you get back and you crash out for the rest of the day. Mm-hmm. A week later, you think, you know what? I'm going to try and do something about it. I'm going to try and get up early, just make the bed. And then I'm going to take the good feeling from that and I'm going to utilize that to go, well, if I've cleared the bedroom, maybe I'll clear the lounge.
Yeah.
And maybe I'll clear something else. And by 11 o'clock, you've done everything. And you're like, right, I'm now going to go out. I'm going to take that positive energy. Now, in financial terms, you imagine taking something that's running well and using the profit from that to run something else and make that better and make something else better and make something else better.
Yeah, so it has a cascade effect.
That's it. Gearing it's a very vague use of the term, but think about that. Think about efficiencies in how you work and who you're working for, how you deal with the fans. So, no internet presence. Let's get that fixed. Let's utilize that. Let's make that a positive. Yes, you stumble, but you do better. I read, one of the items I saw in there, I think it was October 2018. They reckoned that in 6 months, the website interaction had gone up 50%.
I can well believe it, because it was a big push. When they actually developed an internet presence at all, it was not just a website that they developed. It wasn't just a community website. It was a blitzkrieg. It was across social media. So it was Facebook, it was Twitter, it was Twitch TV. It was everything all at once.
But also as well, you had this beautiful moment when the penny drops for fans, especially the lapsed fans who go, yeah, I've heard it's good. Shut up. I've heard it's good. Shut up. Okay, I'll take a look. Oh my God, it's that good.
Yeah, right. That's exactly the experience. I mean, you just described the exact experience. And
then just look at, I've now bloody forgotten his name, but YouTube, like the resurgence of YouTube.
Yeah, right.
And 40K, and I've forgotten the guy who does the really good fiction. No, 09. That's good. That's just going to destroy me now. Yeah, it is. I'm going to have to look it up whilst I'm talking. But just this wave of people who are just discovering it, and so everything just starts going sky high, and the profitability goes up, and then you have new releases which are better. That's it, Lutin09. And people like him who are just reveling in just the strengthening of the lore and the fact that they're moving forward in the story. And so it's not just picking up the old fans and it's not just keeping the new fans. It's creating enough of a positive wave that it's advertising it to far more people than would have done it before.
Absolutely.
And if you think about that, if you think as a fan, it took people maybe a year and a half, 2 years to get on board. That is almost perfectly in sync with the banks who went, hang on a second. If I bought a share for a $5 in 2016, a $5 when it was making 16 million a year. And by the way, that's profit. That's not taking into account how much they're reinvesting.
Yeah, of course.
Imagine if that company's making 81 million. Maybe that share price is worth looking at. And so bit by bit, and it's especially June 2018, the banks started taking notice of Games Workshop.
Right.
And this is not, let me explain as well with banks and owning stuff.
Yeah.
Because people are now going, oh no, the vultures are at the Games Workshop. No, they're not. Look, all people ever want is something to believe in. That's the craziest thing when talking about finance, but it's true. Yeah. People want something that if the boss is good and he runs the company right and it's safe as anything can be in this crazy world, then if we put X million into this bank account, then our investors won't try and burn down our building in a year's time and lose all their money. And so I think it was, I'm looking here, 2018, 19, 19, 19, 18, 18, 18, 18, 19, 19. The biggest holders in Games Workshop at the moment are pretty much all financial companies, and they've all invested in the last 2 years.
It's such a bizarre thing to think, isn't it? It's so strange to think that, as I said before, that this company, which is so ostensibly, from an outside perspective, so niche in terms of its audience, in terms of what it caters to, has become so attractive.
There's so many ways as well that you could look at this. For instance, I was chatting to somebody who owns a shop, who owns his own shop and sells Games Workshop. Right. That he says they are the best people to work with.
Really?
They couldn't be more helpful. They couldn't be more supportive. Right. Maybe not in the past. Maybe things were a bit tougher, but now they're putting people, and this is small shop owners as well. And they're giving them the chance. For instance, if you sell it, great. If you don't, 6 months down the line, we'll swap it for something new. So you have a chance of selling that. It's perfect. They back everything up. They gear everything.
It sounds like there's just an attitudinal change, an ethos change, which has come over the entire company, which is much more positive than it was.
And it is the power of having the right guy in charge.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right.
And trust me, he earns a pretty penny, because you can see his wage. But at the same time, he also invests in the company. They put their money where their mouths are. But for instance, if I said to people, I don't know, 5 years ago that Investec, JP Morgan, Schroders Investment, Standard Life, BlackRock, would have significant shares in a company that praises Slanesh.
Yeah, right.
Just what the hell?
What?
And by the way, as well, that we're talking about lots of money floating around, but the staff are getting bonuses. Yeah, the staff are getting. Now, I don't know what it was like back in the day. I know now that obviously it's considered a very prestige company to work for.
Yeah, absolutely.
The bonus pot is about 5 million a year. I know that's been there for at least 2 years, maybe 3. In fact, they're even as well giving the shareholders a little thank you as well, because the last year's profits were so good. Oh my God, I've not even used the disclaimers
yet. You haven't yet, no. I was going to prod you a little bit. Should we cover our asses here a little bit.
We should.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're talking about finances,
Right.
and especially this is the point as well where we talk about, wow, how great Games Workshop is.
Mm-hmm.
But
I wouldn't worry about that. Adam and I have been doing that. That's what the Fluffenhammer is,
But
basically.
the danger is that we're talking about share prices,
Yes.
and how good that is.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if anyone ever talks in the press, especially I'd say one of the intelligent outlets like Financial Times, or a paper that has to manage its ass.
Yeah, basically. So not the Daily Mail or the Sun.
Please don't mention those names.
Right.
You can mention Nurgle all you want, but
Right.
not those two. But they will say, for instance, we're talking about this, but that doesn't mean that we endorse it. And buying shares is a risky business. And there's somebody who was being told to buy shares by his own bank in 2007 before all of the crap hit the fan.
Yes.
Honestly, folks, shares isn't something that you go into lightly.
No.
So just if you are happy with Games Workshop at the moment, just enjoy being a fan of Games Workshop.
Yeah.
Because honestly, that's all that matters. Don't do shares. Likewise, I have to actually admit as well that yes, I am a shareholder. And the reason that I say that is because obviously that means that I must have a bias. And I am it's very difficult in this story to add negatives into stuff.
Right.
But so people listening, that's why maybe I keep a focus on it. It's because I have an ulterior motive.
Right.
Okay,
so cards
I'm
on
being,
the table, ladies and gents.
I'm being honest with you, and it protects me, it protects you, George, and it protects the podcast. So please, this is not a financial report. Okay, this is us being silly about it.
It kind of is, yeah. I mean, that generally, guys, we talk about things from the lore and the hobby side of things, and we're very enthusiastic. And technically, this whole podcast, this entire project exists because of the change in ethos, this incredible positivity that's erupted over the last decade or so. So yeah, bear that in mind, okay?
But it also as well, you see that when you look into like financial stuff, and I say all this stuff is reported.
Yeah.
You look as well about like how they've tried to change the shops, because let's face it, they are shops, they are stores now. Manchester, they used to have up in the old arcade, used to be right at the back, literally the middle of nowhere. You'd go in. There is nothing that would surprise you about the look, the feel, or the smell of the shop. You know what it's like. And that is saying someone who would walk in there, look, I've done my share of conventions. Okay. You walk in and you go, yeah, this is fans.
This is a fan-based area.
Okay. Now their shop is on the street. It's brilliantly bright. The staff are just incredible. Like they are welcoming. They will, yes, they are great salespeople, but they are very friendly, very open. There's still a game going on, but everything is really clean. It's really well organized. If you want something, they're like, hey, let's direct you to the website, which works really well. And, when you start looking at things like that, you then look at the release of the Sisters of Battle.
Right.
Which sold out really quickly.
What a surprise.
Which, funnily enough, the market noticed it now because it's made enough waves that it's moving through the divisions. By the way, it's now in the second division, the FTSE 250.
What?
Yeah. Which means, by the way, it's in the same division as Marks and Spencer.
What? This is it's insanity, isn't it?
I
find it difficult to even get a grasp on.
Because it's a global company as well.
Right.
So that's why it's pushing. But then you think about other things as well. You think about it's done a couple of years of really good results. It has a boss that is not outspoken. It has a workforce which has a philosophy.
Yeah.
They're putting that money. Everyone has talked about, they're building this new distribution hub near where they're based. When they released the Sisters of Battle, and it sold out straight away. What did they do? They apologized for not being efficient enough at getting the product out and said, we will do it better next time.
Yeah.
Do you realize how much banks love that stuff?
Well, and not only that, how much customers like that.
Exactly. It's the little things, even like the fantasy kind of back step and sort of bringing that back into a back door and everything it can do, it's doing. But then imagine that you're a company like Marvel. Mm-hmm. This is where it all clicks, because Marvel goes, right, well, who can we team up with? Who can we invest in? Who is good from a business point of view that's not going to send us down the drain? Right. Hey, by the way, have you heard of Games Workshop, whose profits have quadrupled in 2 years?
Yeah.
And they'll be like, okay, we're going to do a comic with them. Mm-hmm. Is that financially viable? No, but it builds bridges.
Yeah, right.
Why do you think there's a TV show? Why do you think there's so much stuff going on, so much potential, and it's all that money that's being reinvested? Now the worry is people will go, well, it's just going to go corporate. No, because its very basis is something that you cannot change.
Right.
It's that now you can try and scrap fantasy and then sort of backtrack and change it and modify it. And that was a painful step, but they got through that.
Yeah, and, as has been demonstrated in recent years, that was the right move.
The right move. And the thing is, you can still, if you're canny enough, you can still use the profits from that to then bring back other stuff.
Yeah.
And that's the thing as well. When you're winning, actually giving stuff back makes you look even better. Yeah. But people forget to do that. Games companies, for instance, should really take a notice of Games Workshop.
Oh my God, shouldn't they? Should they? Because of course
EA would have conquered the globe by now.
EA, Bethesda.
Exactly.
My God.
But the thing is that because they're ticking all these boxes, it means as well that they're showing the greater market, look, we're not a flash in the pan.
Yeah.
That we have a steady future.
Yeah.
And the FTSE 250 is about the point where the people investing in them, I say, are banks. If it gets bigger, if it hits the realms of the FTSE 100, which, by the way, is not looking unlikely a decade down the line, especially if it does go global, you will have pension companies investing in orcs. I mean, that is just wonderful.
Isn't it just?
And it rolls out, but there's other things as well. Like, for instance, the value of Games Workshop, so the value of the IP. So that means putting the brand Games Workshop on something is more expensive now. It means you need to bring a lot more to the table if you want to get involved. It means that we might finally see the end of all those crappy video phone game adaptations, because suddenly the pressure is like you're not dealing with a small company that's desperate for you to do a phone app of theirs. It's like, no, we're Games Workshop. Yeah. You shut the F up until you come with us something really good that our fans will like.
We have a pedigree, We have a reputation,
And also as well, the other thing is advertising.
Yeah.
You realize, like, there have been 3 articles on Games Workshop on the BBC in the past 2 months. That is advertising you couldn't beg for, because there are a whole bunch of people, and we're talking older people who maybe have either missed it or just dismissed it.
Yeah.
And they're going, hang on a second, what the lead figure people? Mm-hmm. And you're just like, yeah.
Yes,
and they will go in. And you were getting, when I went to the shop recently, and I went in there just to see. I wanted to see what this new shop was like. I wanted to see the way it was run. I say the staff were amazing. Yeah. I mean, they were so slick. But whilst I was there, literally a dozen people came in who were brand new.
Right.
And they were like, this is what you can do. Here's the starter set, which is cleverly designed so you don't need to spend out much. Here is the basic idea, cleverly designed so you don't need to, you won't be gatekeeped if you go near it. Here is the gaming area. Notice the diversity in the people playing the game now, because it's It's and by the way as well, they're very much like I'd say the robots that change shape, whatever they're called, animorphs or whatever.
Power Rangers, Super
that's
Sentai,
it.
whatever it is. Yeah.
When especially when female fans get involved and they own it, they fight for it with a creativity and things like cosplay and crafts that often male fans don't have.
Right.
So you're going to get that spurt of growth that way. You have, of course, the fact that Games Workshop has its own Warhammer world.
Yes.
Which I was lucky enough to visit with Adam, and I was just stunned because it's like Disneyland but with rust and empty bullet casings, and you just think, yeah, this has the legs,
right?
But it means now at the moment, Games Workshop, all that profit means that they can tackle things right. So when they release a box set, for instance, the Sisters of Battle, that is the quality that they want to assign to it. They don't scrimp on it. It means that they can look as well at that profit and loss figure and go, right, how expensive are the pots of paint? How expensive is this? How expensive is that? How can we make it more efficient? Not cheaper, but more efficient. And you're seeing that. You know, they've talked a lot about how they sculpt the figures and how they create them, and they're trying to bring that cost down.
Yeah.
And it's all those things that, although I know they're financial, they do impact the fans.
Of
and
course.
It means, and also as well, if the Black Library is doing really well, then they're going to be able to bring out better product.
Absolutely.
And they're going to do more, things like audiobooks. I don't know the ins and outs, but I know there are certain things within every company which run at a loss.
Yeah.
And they do it because the fans want it. They can do more of that if they are bigger. Yes, they can get pressure from shareholders, but at the end of the day, the fan base is getting more and more ravenous.
Absolutely.
So therefore, they can't change a lot of the fundamentals. I mean, I had a chat to somebody the other day because there was a guy at the bank that I work at on the second floor in the kitchen area, sat there dry brushing a dreadnought at lunchtime, and I just stood there and went, oh my God, it's literally it's just sort of seeping into everything.
It's everywhere, isn't it? It's so strange. It's so strange because
I chatted to him about how they could do the TV show and how they could get the right mix of characters and how they could get because obviously female Space Marines but how they could actually just not avoid the issue but address the issue and get over it.
Yeah.
And I walked away and I thought, I've had a chat with someone about Warhammer in a bank, and neither of us is embarrassed.
Yeah, right. It's the culture, isn't it? The culture has changed dramatically. It's shifted.
If you think about it, if you've got grown men and women, and it's more important that it is the women, by the way, because it gains legitimacy. Admittedly, a little bit more racially diverse and gender fluid would be nice, but we're getting there.
It's happening. It is slowly happening.
But the fact that a guy dressed in red, white, and blue, the shield, which is red, white, and blue, is one of the most recognizable figures in cinema at the moment. And you just think, right, so you compare that to a lore which is deeper than pretty much anything else out there, you can't brush it off anymore.
Right.
And people are having to go, well, I like fantasy. Well, then you're like 40k. Yeah, but I like grim dark. I think
you'll be fine.
But I don't like that. I like kind of more orcs and elves. Oh no, they got that covered. Yeah. But what about guns and battles? Yeah, don't worry.
It's all there. Don't you worry about it. Yeah.
It's just, and it hasn't even reached its potential yet.
No, it's nowhere near. It's still escalating, isn't it? I mean, this is something Adam and I we jokingly lament almost every time we do a Fluffenhammer, which is keeping up. It's keeping up with the good stuff. Because we are now at that point where Games Workshop has become a monthly cost. It's something that you build into your budget, and B, almost everything they release is something that you want a part of.
It's true. I think the nicest thing about it is, do you feel a pressure to buy that?
No,
or do you just feel a pleasure
it's
in
a
investing in
desire.
something good?
It's a desire. It's not a pressure. It's a desire. It's the fact that I know if I buy, for example, the Sisters of Battle Codex, it will be a great read. It's that more than anything. If I buy one of the miniatures from that range, even though I don't collect the Sisters of Battle and I've never really had that much of an interest in them, I know it'll be superb.
Yeah.
I'll get joy out of it. I'll get pleasure out of it.
And then you've got so many facets. So the audiobook people are happy there's more books coming out, and the quality of the recordings is going through the roof.
Oh yeah, well now of course they're attracting like actors that people recognize.
I still think what was it? The Flight to the Eisenstein is my go-to.
Yeah.
It's just like, and there's a couple of actors as well, and actors that, by the way, make my voice look positively flowery. But you just listen to them and you're like, oh, it's so good.
Right. Well, with the Warhammer Horror label, which he's just building, that's just gaining momentum at the moment. We had Doug Bradley, who plays Pinhead in Hellraiser, of course.
It's beautiful.
Right.
Because they've got the means to hit everything.
Yeah. These extra associations and these markets they're expanding into. I mean, obviously, I operate in the independent horror community quite a lot, and I know writers now, like Paul Kane, for example, who's associated with Clive Barker. He writes a lot of sort of Hellraiser documentary books and things like that. He wrote a couple of short stories for the Warhammer Horror label. So you're getting all of these new associations, these new fans coming in from all over the shop, very strange and diverse areas, who will, of course, latch on to something. I mean, how can, for example, people who read someone like Paul Kane, who's very like Clive Barker, not look at, say, the Drukhari, the Homunculi, and not think, those are amazing, I want a part of them?
It is, as well, it almost takes it to another level, because it was created out of the spotlight.
Right.
It was created without any rules or concessions to being popular. So when you have, when I say, I don't know, like, for instance, Nurgle, obviously, how would you market that if that was new today? It would be, you know what it would be? It would be snotty noses and it would be garbage pail kids, but it's not. It's people with their intestines hanging out and just, it has a beautiful strength in just how deep it can sink its claws into facets. But what I love is that naturally businesses are going to want to pull it towards the brighter side.
Yeah.
They're going to want to pull it towards, and I've seen like the kids' books, and you know what? I have no problem with that.
No, not at all.
I've heard about the Marvel stuff. I have no issue with that whatsoever, because I know that Marvel are more scared of Games Workshop than Games Workshop is scared of Marvel.
Absolutely.
I know the TV producers are petrified of doing anything too light.
Yep.
And also the entire weight of the law is pushing down back at the show going, you're not going to make a happy ending, goddammit.
Well, no. You're not. And, I know that there was actually a backlash. There was not a significant one, but there was some furor about the Black Library children's books, for example, which obviously are slightly lighter than your standard 40k fare. But ultimately, it hasn't in any way detracted from what's going on with the rest of the lore, with the rest of the game, which has just deepened and darkened, if anything.
Well, can I ask as well, what age range were they for?
Oh, the Black Library children's books.
Yeah.
I think it was aiming at a sort of like 8 to early teenager.
You see, we had Choose Your Own Adventure. How is that? That is worse than the kids' books.
Yeah.
That was more gruesome. That was darker. So, and we lap that stuff up. And also as well, if you're a parent and you've got kids of that age, and you've got the ability to buy a book for your kid on the thing that you love. Yeah, I'm sure some of the backlash wasn't from parents who love Games Workshop. So, and again, it might be a loss. It might not work. But you know what? They're trying it.
At least they're trying, aren't they? Yeah. And also, you have to bear in mind, at the same time the Black Library had its first children's books released, it was also cementing the Warhammer Horror label, which is the exact opposite. It's actually taking the grim darkness of both the fantasy and the science fiction settings and going deeper with it into genuinely horrific territory.
It's something for everyone.
Exactly.
I mean, I don't know how many millionaires are listening to this show, but I doubt everyone is buying everything that's being produced by Warhammer every single day. So, sorry, by Games Workshop. So maybe having that extra breadth to the line means that you can pick what you want. Sorry, I know that sounds very ABC, but I look at, for instance, Disney stores. Disney stores are heavily into the superheroes at the moment. Do you know what you can't find in a Disney store? A comic.
Right.
They don't sell the comics. They miss out on possibly the biggest gateway to kids going, I want to be that hero. I want to be part of that world. Hey kid, here's a £2.99 comic. You can do that. Yay. No, Games Workshop know exactly what they're doing. And I mean, yes, I look at it from a business point of view because we have to now, because they are now a big flag bearer for England.
Of course.
And they are kicking butt where a lot of high street companies are failing.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, there's just the way they're rolling out their stuff. And when you look at everything from a business point of view, it makes you further appreciate why they're still releasing what they're releasing. They're still going. So we're going to release this thing called Sisters of Battle. Dear Banks, we're releasing the Sisters of Battle today.
Yes.
What are the Sisters of Battle?
Nuns with guns.
Nuns with guns. Okay, well, we don't really like that because that's
religious
stepping on religion.
Iconography. Exactly. It's women in violence. It's lots of things that are unsafe.
Exactly.
All rolled together.
Thank you so much for your feedback, Banks. We're going to release this anyway. We're also going to make a profit on it, and you're going to like it and read about it on the BBC. Have a good day, sir. Have a good day.
Yeah, it's going to have all of this medieval imagery. It's going to have angels and doves and roses, and it's going to have the nuns with guns who self-excoriate themselves in religious fervour, you know?
Well, I mean, considering that we actually had a member of, a member of the government who did a similar thing, I don't think it's something that we should really be shocked by.
No, you're absolutely right.
But if you then look at, it's crazy how if you look in, for instance, the Financial Times, when they talk about Games Workshop, there's two images that they use. One is outside Games Workshop, where they've got the Space Marine statue.
The statue.
And the other one is a close-up of an unknown but probably male, slightly chubby hand painting a lead figure. And it's like, really? You still haven't figured out how corporate this is yet, have you? Just wait until you do. But no, seriously, folks, as well, you can find out, like, Games Workshop annual reports are on there. They talk about the direction of the company. They talk about what they're aiming to do. You go to the Times and they've got breakdowns of everything. You can see every part. Trust me, there's so much of Games Workshop that is now laid bare.
Right.
And then you try and match that up with the fact that there is, I believe, one person who is the lawmaster of Games Workshop. And you think, they've got all that stuff around him, and then you've got one dude with just a very, very big book.
The pressure.
No pressure at all.
Oh, my God.
He comes in one day, email comes in. Dear Bob, we need you to write the next year. Love, management. P.S. We want another big player to return.
Yeah.
Love you, bye.
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
Just like,
I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? From the customer perspective, the sensation of how different it is now to the aforementioned dark times it's antipodean. It really is. I mean, as I say, people like Adam and myself, we were outside of the hobby, really, before this change occurred. We were sort of watching it from a great, great distance. And it was... The experience was a little like watching a car crash. You know, it was watching something horrific happen to something that you once loved in a very, very, very slow way. And then suddenly, almost overnight, there was this change in the atmosphere, and suddenly they were doing things, suddenly they were responding, suddenly they were doing what fans have been clamoring for almost decades in some instances.
Do you feel worried by the amount of press that the financial side is now getting? Do you worry that it's getting too corporate?
No, not really. I mean, to be honest, it went too corporate beforehand. That was really the problem. It seemed that the sense was that before the dark times ended, it felt as though the company was trying to mold the experience. What it was trying to do was push us to play and to buy and to engage with the hobby on its terms, rather than on our terms. And of course, it's a hobby company. If you try to do that, people will just move away. They will just go to not only that, it's a hobby company where the price of initial engagement, not just financially, but in terms of time and emotional and creative engagement, is huge. Massive. So people are just going to move away. They're just going to go and get a video game or something to that effect.
I mean, there have been as well, the dark times. Part of the reason as well why they were as tough as they were is because you've had fantasy card games, you've had other fantasy genres, you've had Lord of the Rings, which was actually a very bad thing for Games Workshop, because although the initial films were good, The Hobbit just kind of killed the momentum just like that. And for fandoms, that it really hit hard. But now you think, if you switch on YouTube, good chance one of your choices is going to be for people playing a role-playing game.
Absolutely. I mean, this is another thing that's happened culturally, isn't it? You've had the resurgence of where Games Workshop began, which is, of course, tabletop role-playing games. It's become vogue again. I mean, look at D&D. Look at where D&D have gone now. You actually have now rolling, traveling stage plays that sell out auditoriums of people playing D&D.
Do you know I can now buy a set of branded dice, branded to a podcast.
To a podcast?
That a podcast stroke YouTube, live game environment.
This wouldn't be Acquisitions Incorporated or something?
No, it wouldn't. It would actually be Life of the Party.
Right.
Which is a member of.
Of course.
And it's just like, sorry, that for those not knowing, that's a friend we know from back in the days. But it's crazy that you have that.
It's insane, isn't it? And you know what? It shouldn't be as much fun as it is, but watching these podcasts myself, it's phenomenally fun.
But you've said before as well, I'm sure you have. We spoke about this on one of our brief chats. Mm-hmm. By the way, this podcast is more than the total sum of our interaction over an entire decade.
It's insane, isn't it? We always mean to sit down and chat, and I think we always say we're going to sit down and chat, and then it never happens for one reason.
I'm usually running 500 people and yelling at people.
You're normally enormously busy, and I'm normally skitting about the place, engaging with various people.
But you've kind of reached this point as well where you've said this before, I'm sure, where like the whole history of storytelling And it was kind of creating stories together in an environment. And this is especially true for horror, the story around the campfire.
Of course.
And role-playing games kind of have an element of that.
Well, they are the postmodern equivalent of it, aren't
Yeah.
they? They are what it's become. In the same way, it's a very strange way to take the podcast, but you look at certain subcultures on the internet, for example, like the furry subculture.
Yes.
People who identify with animal avatars. That is not a new thing. If you take a look at human culture and history, and certainly mythology, human beings have been identifying with animal avatars since before there were human civilizations. It's just the postmodern equivalent of it.
Oh, you're right. Apologies there.
No.
I was just drinking some mead.
Mead. Oh, fantastic. Yeah. So fulfilling the Viking part, the Nordic part.
Well, I do brew my own mead.
Oh,
so
wow.
This was one from last year.
Superb.
So I will be comatose within about 26 minutes.
I was going to say, that's the end of the podcast, ladies and gents. It's going to degenerate from this point on.
Oh. But if to people listening, don't worry about the finances. The finances are good.
Yeah.
It's a fascinating tale that is there for you to read. And don't ever think it's dry, because your history with Games Workshop, when it's succeeded, when it's failed. You can track the feelings of the fans against physical hard data.
Yeah.
And the next time that they do a talk on the future of Games Workshop, or they release their figures, or they release a report, download it.
Yeah.
Catch it, because it will tell you a lot about where the company's going.
Yeah, and it is interesting. It is not something I would immediately have leapt to be perfectly honest. I may have even dismissed it as being, it's too above my head, it's too dry for me, it's too niche, it's not something I would engage with. Actually, having read some of the reports, some of the articles, it's fascinating.
And all fans are in that wonderful position. You get what they're selling.
Yeah.
So you are already 100 times more comfortable with the content of those reports than any banker.
Absolutely.
Who really doesn't like the idea of skulls on sticks.
Or of sort of diseased maggot men with their bowels exposed.
Woohoo!
It's funny that you mentioned it, because of course we had the whole controversy involving Slanesh as well throughout this period. There was a sort of part and parcel of what we call the dark times was this pervasive rumour that Games Workshop were going to squat Slanesh because it was considered to be unmarketable, it was considered to be too adult-oriented, and so on and so forth. Which, for all I know, there may have been some truth to it. Somewhere, maybe that discussion happened somewhere behind the scenes. But what people term New Games Workshop have done is said, oh yeah, well, here's Slanesh for you, and it's going to be more ribald and more overt than it's ever been.
I'm sorry, if once Games Workshop took that step into horror, the Chaos Gods became literally the biggest players in the game.
Yeah. Because
they can do so much stuff.
Yeah.
And the thing is as well that now, quick question: Has Games Workshop ever done sort of the kind of Cthulhu-esque? Have they ever moved into that sort of territory?
Well, technically, I mean, the Chaos Powers are kind of Cthulhu-esque, but they have, yeah. I mean, the metaphysics of the both the 40k universe and what are now the AOS realms is kind of Lovecraftian anyway.
You just think as well how big a potential they've got to market in areas where they might not even be recognizable as Games Workshop. And you could end up with a following that has no care at all for any of the other products. And yet they'll lap this stuff up. So 30 years down the line, will there end up being a horror film aimed at adults that has nothing to do with Space Marines, but maybe has Chaos God elements?
It's funny you should mention that. You know the film Event Horizon, yeah?
Yes.
a lot of people have, I mean, it's not the case, but a lot of people have sort of fan theorized. They've tried to create a sort of fan lore around the game that proclaims it to be set in the game, in the Warhammer 40,000 universe, in its earliest days.
I've never thought anything other than that.
It looks, if you look at the imagery that's used, it's so much like what happens to spacecraft that are traveling through the warp, for example.
And also space or space vessels as cathedrals.
Right.
I mean, that was the whole.
The imagery.
It's there. It does play to the other issue with Games Workshop is, as you've said many a time, it's a niche.
Mm-hmm.
So they do need to continue to appeal to as wide a market as possible.
That's right.
To get the niche elements of each of those.
And it's very difficult. It's a difficult set of plates to keep spinning.
But because the fandom's on their side, they have that force. They just need to guide them in the right direction.
That's it.
And bit by bit, the fandom are doing the advertising for them.
Yeah, maintain that momentum. That's all they need to do. If they carry on along the current trajectory, they'll be fine.
Oh, wonderful stuff.
They will be fine. I mean, it's hard to see another dark time arising, to be honest. From a fan perspective, it really is. Everything's exciting.
The only danger is if anyone truly big tried to buy it.
Yeah.
But because of the size of Games Workshop now, very few could even afford it.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if you changed it one iota, you would lose everything about it, and suddenly it would just collapse.
Yeah.
So
it would happen quickly as well, wouldn't it? It would be much quicker than people think.
Yeah, because it wouldn't be rage, sort of the sort of rage that computer games get, where people rage against them, but people still buy them.
Yeah, right.
They'd rage against them, and then they'd cancel their White Dwarf order, or they'd cancel this, or they'd cancel that, and it would be very, very quick.
Yeah. As almost happened, it's an era that Games Workshop have actually been through already. So hopefully lessons learned,
Yeah, unlike the Imperium of Man, maybe they can learn from the past.
Right, instead of enshrining the mistakes as sacred.
Fantastic.
Right? Superb stuff. So, Adam, is that the end of your story? Is there anything else you'd like to chat about?
I think that's it. I think
excellent.
Because I don't want to bore people with the finances, but it's very nice to be part of the world at the moment.
Right, and it's such an interesting perspective to get here on the Fluffenhammer, because obviously Adam and I, we tend to enthuse about the hobbyist side of things. So it's nice to have a really different look at what's going on in the internals of the company, the guts of it.
Well, you realise as well that there's going to be bankers even in the world of 40k. So I wonder what an orc banker would be like.
Oh my god!
Huge bag of teeth.
I'm trying to imagine an orc in a suit.
Oh, that'd be so. Well, actually, I know several orcs who wear suits. They're called senior managers, and they're not to be trifled with.
Superb. Thank you so much, Adam. Thanks for coming.
No worries, pleasure.
Do you have anything that you would like to pimp out or anything like that? By the way.
I've really sort of disappeared from a lot of the stuff that I used to do. So all I would say is I'm on Instagram. Mm-hmm. I am AD8M White.
Excellent.
If you're interested, I post weird and wonderful pictures every day.
Yes, your photographs.
That is the extent of my creative art for the moment.
I will place a link down below, ladies and gentlemen.
Woohoo!
So thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you, mate.
And thank you for listening, guys. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye.
Superb, man.